What's up everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Hateful Truth video game review series, where I give you maximum truth and minimum bullshit regarding the latest video game releases. And the game we're going to talk about today, controversial in the fact that, similarly to a lot of other games in the survival horror genre, as of late, the game seems to possibly be taking a turn in a different direction. Now, the purpose of this review is to explain to you how this game might have changed from previous iterations and what to expect if you're going to check it out. The game I'm talking about today is Dead Space 3, okay? Dead Space 3 is unique in the fact, well, not really unique, but it's unique in the fact that for the first time in this series, you can do either a single-player playthrough of the game or you can do a cooperative two-player playthrough of the game. Now, just to note, it is not split screen. You have to have two people who own the game and play it online, okay? So, right off the bat, when it was announced that Dead Space 3 was going to be a co-op game, I think a lot of people had this attitude, oh no, that's it, it's ruined, all of the atmosphere and all of the scariness of this game and this line is now ruined because everyone knows that when you're playing a scary game with a friend, it's nowhere near as scary as playing it by yourself because you're able to talk, communicate, crack jokes, yada yada yada. I guess the core of this issue is going to be what kind of a person you are personally when it comes to being scared. Because there are different kinds of fear. You could be jump scares, which, by the way, are very prevalent in Dead Space 3. That certainly hasn't changed throughout this series. There's psychological and suspenseful build-up scares, where you don't know what's going on, you're very confused, there's horror and horrible things going on around you. And the question is whether or not that's present in Dead Space 3, and we're going to address that, okay? So, third game in the series, this is pretty funny, they actually made it so that if you buy this on Xbox 360, you can use the Kinect. It doesn't matter, because let's face it, no one uses the Kinect anymore. The Kinect was, exactly as I said it would be 2 years ago, a failed experiment. No one's using it. There's no benefit whatsoever to playing the game with Kinect. There was no reason for them to even add the Kinect functionality because no one used it. That's just honest truth right there. So, third game in this survival horror series, you have to understand that some things are going to start to change. And what I mean is, really the core of a horror is almost a mystery aspect and a lack of understanding of what exactly is going on that leads to this overall feeling of dread and suspense. And now that we're at the third installment of this game, and after the end of Dead Space 2, when a hell of a lot of stuff was revealed about what was going on with the markers, which are basically the things that are creating these monsters to begin with, and now that we know that there's kind of involvement of certain parties, I'm trying to be very broad here and not spoil anything, it's kind of hard in a third installment of a game to keep going along with the same plot and have the same characters such as Isaac Clarke and still have that psychological scare factor, because at this point, I'll be honest, yes, there are some new plot points and things that are revealed during the course of Dead Space 3, but you pretty much know what's going on in general, at least. There are some twists during the course of the story that do mix things up, so I don't want anyone to think that, oh, the plot's just the same as Dead Space 2, but it's a new location. That's not the case. There is more development of the plot, but at the same time, it's not as prevalent as it was in the previous two games. And the reason I can really give some perspective to this is, just recently I did a replay of Dead Space 1, which I previously had not had the chance to play fully on YouTube. And I can tell you, in Dead Space 1, when you have no idea what these necromorphs are, you don't know what's going on, what's real, what's fantasy, what's reality, what you're hallucinating, you know, and you don't know who's behind everything, it's a real crazy, scary feeling versus comparing that to now, where you've already had 3 games now to hash out this general plot. You pretty much know the gist of everything that's going on. And even though there are going to be some revelations during the course of this game, I have to admit it's not as scary as the previous two, simply because it's the third installment. I really feel that if Dead Space wants to go back to being as scary as it used to be, what needs to happen is there needs to be a new protagonist. You can't keep going with Isaac Clarke, because now he's basically a pro, he's a veteran. He's been in this situation 3 times, he knows exactly what's going on, he's able to handle the crazy shit that's going on. It's not like it's messing with his mind or anything anymore. At this point, he's too much accustomed to the situation. The best horror movies are the ones where you got people who don't know what's going on, they're getting chased by a killer who they don't understand, and that's really where the horror aspect comes out of it. So, this game does choose to focus in on Isaac Clarke again. So let's talk a little bit about the plot, very generally. I won't spoil too much. The bottom line is, it's years after Dead Space 2, and the Unitologists, which is the religious movement based around these alien artifacts, the markers that have been found and reproduced by mankind, have now almost started a world war. They're really starting to take over the planet. They've made this big movement that the Earth government is evil for working with these markers, and that basically the Earth government should have just let the markers be turned on and let convergence happen. And so you join Isaac Clarke, who basically for the past several years has been trying to do research and figure out, get to the bottom of everything, but he just wants to be left alone. But he ends up getting thrown into the situation yet again because the last basic squad of the Earth government's security forces come and basically kidnap him and say, listen, we think we found the marker homeworld. We think we know where all these markers have originated from. And therefore we need you with us, because you're the expert on the subject, and you've destroyed markers before. We need you with us so we can get to this homeworld and we can just get to the bottom of it and stop this, because the necromorph infestation is now coming across the entire world. It's on the moon. It's everywhere. And so it's kind of a convoluted story a little bit. But basically you're with this Earth government team, and your fellow teammate is John Carver, who is a soldier, an operative, whatever you want to call him, for this Earth Government Security Force team. And he serves either as a supporting character if you play the game single player, or as your co-op partner if you play the game two-player co-op. And honestly, the game really, depending on how you play it, because I played a full two-player co-op with John Rambo, and now at night, I've actually, for a few hours at night, been replaying the game single player to get a feeling of what the game's like single player, and I can tell you that there really isn't too much deviation between the two play styles. What I can tell you is this: if you played single player, it's a heck of a lot more creepy, because John Carver isn't there with you the whole time. You don't have someone to communicate and talk with, and therefore, you're always on your own. The jump scares, you're going to get a little bit more scared, because, uh-oh, there's no one there who may get the shot off before me. It's all placed on my shoulders. The story changes very ever so slightly if you play the game co-op. And what I mean is, there's going to be several optional missions. There's 3 of them. Where, and that's right, for the very first time, Dead Space actually has optional missions. And there's 2 different varieties of them. So let's get into that right now. There are optional missions based around just going to an optional area that maybe you could get some resources. Maybe you can find some more ammo, some more weapon parts to improve your weapons. And that is a core change in the game that we'll get to. But also, there are optional missions that are story-based, based off of John Carver, and you can only access these 3 missions if you're playing the game two-player co-op. Now, these missions are very interesting, and if you want my honest opinion, these missions overall add to the horror and the fear aspect, and very massively to the plot of the game, because John Carver has never been experiencing this kind of situation before. This is the first time he's been thrown into a necromorph situation. And what ends up happening, without giving too many spoilers, I'm not going to spoil what actually happens during the missions, but John Carver hallucinates things. So if you're playing as John Carver in a co-op game, you will see crazy shit going on in these optional missions that give significant amount of backstory to John. They explain things about his family and things that kind of really are interesting, and they rivet you to the story. If you're playing as Isaac Clarke, you don't get to see any of these hallucinations, and therefore you really miss out on a major part. And if you're playing solo, you never even have the opportunity to play these side missions. So playing the game in co-op actually significantly adds to the story of the game, and in my opinion is actually one of the best parts of the game. But I am a little disappointed that the design choice that Visceral Games made, that you can't access these missions if you're playing solo, or if you're playing as Isaac. You literally miss out on what's going on during these missions. And it's a little annoying, because now a lot of people have even been saying, we want to see what's going on with the John Carver missions, but you've never had the chance to jump in as John Carver. Every time you play online, you end up as Isaac. And very few people have even done playthrough footage of this. The only reason I'm aware of it is because John Rambo on launch day was here playing on another TV right next to me, and I was watching his monitor looking at the crazy shit going on, and I was like, whoa, that's really crazy that this is happening, and it's so different from what I'm seeing on my monitor playing as Isaac. So That's really the biggest change in number 1, is that there's side content and optional missions and co-op in the game. Change in number 2, one of the biggest changes, you now have the ability to customize your weapons on the fly at weapon benches. So I'm not just talking upgrade the damage of a tool that you find. Now you can actually completely customize your weapon. You have an upper tool and a lower tool. So you might have a gun and a flamethrower. You might have a ripper blade and a shotgun. And customizing these, you can put buffs and different things on them based off of items that you find during the game and or things that you craft at the bench based off of resources that you find during looting during the course of the game. And really, this in itself is like a mini game that becomes a core part of the game, and it's very addictive. In fact, John Rambo became addicted to doing this during the course of the game, and he just could not get himself away from a bench, okay? It's a lot of fun because as you realize during the course of the game, not only are you upgrading damage and maybe the rate of fire and the amount of shots in your clip, but you can actually add elemental things to your gun. So, for example, by the end of the game, I had found this elemental enhancement that added acid damage to my weapons. And so I was flamethrowing things, but they were also dying of acid melting. And then by the end of the game, I had also found one that had a stasis ability. So as enemies were coming at me and I shot them, they were actually freezing in place. And it made the game insanely easier at that point. Which leads to my next point, which is the third major change when it comes to Dead Space 3. This game throws a shitload of enemies at you. More so than any other Dead Space game, this game, even in single player, throws a ridiculous amount of enemies at you. It almost becomes scary because you don't know if you turn the corner if there's going to be nobody, one guy, or 42 dudes running straight for you, okay? And I really feel the reason that they did this is to up the difficulty because they realized that by being able to customize your weapons, you actually become almost overpowered to a point. Where, okay, if I have a gun that every time I shoot you, you slow down automatically, well, obviously that's going to be, you know, a big change to the fact that I don't have to be constantly using my stasis ability like in previous games, and it makes the game a hell of a lot easier. So how do they compensate? Let's throw 40 enemies at you at once. And so it gets really crazy near the end of the game where you're fighting wave after wave of enemies who are just coming at you, and it can really become almost like a gauntlet near the end of the game. And the last change is that the maneuverability is now at a maximum. Meaning, you know, Dead Space 1, sure, the controls were pretty decent, but still you were almost, you know, you couldn't dodge, you couldn't easily move left or right or get out of the way of something. And so when you were fighting an enemy that was fast, it was a little frustrating. Dead Space 3, you can now fully side roll left and right, you can roll forward, you can roll backward. So there's even going to be critical fights during the game where you might be fighting a large monster or boss where the only way to avoid getting hit is to roll out of the way. And so the game in that respect has become a lot more action-based, and I do have to say that there were many times during certain chapters of the game where you're actually on an ice planet that I made the direct comparison. The game felt like I was playing Lost Planet, okay? And so that is going to be a comparison some people are going to make. But the critical thing here is that that's not the whole game. That's only a select few chapters of the game. And speaking of chapters of the game actually has 19 chapters as well as 10 optional side missions. So all in all, if you do all the content of the game, you could probably get in one playthrough about 16 hours of gameplay out of Dead Space 3. And this is a major change. In previous installments, this game has been, what, 8 hours long? Now they've finally really upped the amount of content to the point where you can get a significant chunk of hours of gameplay out of the game. And then, in addition to that, whether or not you played your first playthrough single or co-op, you're probably going to want to go back and do the flip side to see the changes in dialogue, to see the Carver side missions, and all that jazz. So it really is very interesting when it comes to that there is a replayability factor that maybe there haven't been much of in previous Dead Space games. Now, one of the other primary changes of the game is that the suits that you wear actually don't affect the stats anymore. Previous games of Dead Space, depending on which suit you had more inventory slots, or you had more health, more armor. That doesn't affect it anymore. You actually manually upgrade your rig at the rig station using the assets and resources that you find by looting during the course of the game. The one other new thing that's in the game are the support drones, or supply drones. I forget exactly what they're called, but what these are during the course of the game you get these. It's these little robots, and during the course of the game you have the ability to put that robot down, and then all of a sudden couple minutes later, you'll get a message, oh, the supply drone has returned to the bench. And the next time that you go to a bench, a weapons bench, the supply drone will have returned and actually scavenged resources for you. And those resources, as I previously mentioned, can be used to upgrade weapons, to upgrade your rig. Now, it's almost like a mini game because there are key parts and key places on the maps of Dead Space 3 where you can place those supply drones and you get bonus resources, okay? So it's actually a cool and fun minigame to go around trying to find a key spot based off of audio cues and also a radar when you're holding the drone to figure out where to put them down to get the maximum amount of resources. Now, there is a part of the game that's very controversial, okay? There's a part of the game where you can pay right at the get-go of the game to get resources that will allow you to buy better guns, to upgrade your armor, and stuff like that. It's completely optional, you don't have to do it. And in fact, as you send out those supply drones, they find things called ration seals. And I didn't know this during my first playthrough of the game, but you can actually use ration seals to buy the same things that you can pay real-life money for to get those upgrades and things at the supply bench, or the weapon bench. So, I didn't know that at first. I found it out much later on, after I'd already beaten the game a first time. A lot of people are up in arms that you can buy stuff day one, but at the same time, it's a single-player game. It's not like you're competing with other people to beat the game, so who cares if one guy wants to spend double the amount of money to buy extra items? The bottom line is just playing the game, you're going to have enough of these assets to make some pretty powerful weapons, to upgrade your rig. You don't need to spend the money. If people have extra cash and they want to blow it on the game, and they're dumb enough to do it, I don't see any negative thing about that. It's not something like they're nickel and diming you for DLC content. The content is already available in the game if you just play it. Alright. The one other thing that's a major change from Dead Space 2, no online play. That's right, there's no online multiplayer. It's just the co-op campaign. And I think that's actually a positive because it allowed them to focus more on the game and make the game 19 chapters long and 16 hours long rather than having a shorter campaign and then having online play, which is kind of what happened with Dead Space 2. I mean, I'll be honest, the online play of Dead Space 2 was okay, but it wasn't anything that I was dying to play, and it was kind of confusing as to why it was even in there. I think they just felt like they needed to throw it in to say it had it, and so that people can't complain that it's a single-player game. I think they did the right thing with Dead Space 3 by just focusing on the campaign itself. Alright. So all factors considered, the graphics of this game are great, although the frame rate does chop up sometime. The story is very interesting. I thought the story was going to be boring. The story actually ended up gripping me, and if you actually read all the text logs and listen to all the audio logs, you get a significant amount of information that really, wow, I didn't know this is where the plot was going, and it really will kind of turn you for a loop when it finally is revealed near the end of the game what's going on, and you're like, wow, I did not see that coming. And also, the John Carver side missions. I have to say, I definitely think that everyone should give it a shot and jump online, at least for the missions for John Carver, and play through them because they're worth it to learn about what happened to John, and his backstory is very interesting, okay? So what do I think overall? I think that fans of the Dead Space series will like this game because there are significant runs in the game where it plays just like the previous two installments. In fact, if you play the game solo, it does play a lot like the previous two installments. It's only when you jump into the cooperative version of the game that it gets a little bit different. I overall think that the game is fun. It is still scary, especially if you're playing the John Carver missions and he's hallucinating and seeing crazy shit for the first time. It's going to give you a lot more of a scariness feeling, or if you play it solo, it is a lot more creepy and scary because, again, you're the only person there. You're relying on yourself to survive rather than someone who might save your ass, okay? But that being said, the game is a lot more action-oriented now. A lot more enemies, the customizable weapons make it easier to kill a lot more enemies. The boss fights are a lot more action-based than they used to be. And a lot of people might be turned off by that. I mean, let's face it, all these survival horror games are kind of going in this direction, and I really feel it's because the plots have gotten to a point, again, just like Resident Evil 6, the necromorphs have now taken over everywhere, so no matter where you go, there's going to be a bunch of necromorphs. And so it makes sense that you're going to need better weapons to take out these necromorphs. It's going to be more action-based. If they really want to get back to their roots, they need to get away from Isaac Clarke. They need to have a game where it's not all about Isaac anymore, okay? It really needs to be a game where it's more of a psychological thriller. Maybe someone who's been thrown into this for the first time, and they need to figure out what's going on. But for the direction the series is going, and by the way, it does kind of look like there will be another one due to the ending of the game, which I'm not going to spoil at all in any way, shape, or form. I was actually pleased with the ending of the game. It wasn't like a shitty ending where you don't know what happened. I definitely liked the ending of the game. But I like that where the series is going. I think that this is a great direction. I think they did a good job. And I enjoyed the game and accepting all the changes. If you're looking for the old school classic survival horror, you're going to have parts of this game that have it and parts that don't. So I think as long as you have an open mind and you're willing to accept that there's going to be variety in the gameplay, you'll like the game. But if you're that kind of person, oh, I want the old days back, this is not going to be your cup of tea, okay? Because there are some changes to the game that are going to make it deviate from the previous formula. So overall, all things considered, now that I've played through more than half of the single-player campaign, I've played through a full co-op campaign, I've fully explored the customization options, the side content, I've actually played through every side mission in the game now. Dead Space 3 is a very entertaining experience. It's a great bang for your buck, being that it's a 16-hour long game, plus there's replayability. I'm going to give Dead Space 3 an 8.5 out of 10. I think that it does lose a little bit, just a little bit, when it comes to the fact that there's a little bit of the survival horror aspect that's missing, but you could still get that out of it, and enough out of it that it is a fun game. There are a couple foibles here and there, especially with, there were a couple game bugs. Like, I remember trying to put down my supply drone a couple times, I would lock up. There are also a couple places where it's just a little bit confusing because you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing. And in that particular is one John Carver side mission that John Rambo and I got stuck on for like a half hour because we couldn't figure out what to do. But those foibles aside, the game is highly entertaining. One of my favorite games so far this year, obviously because the year just started, but I really feel that this game probably will be one of my favorite games of the whole year. Definitely check it out. A good installment in the Dead Space series. I'd probably say I liked it more than Dead Space 2, but not as much as Dead Space 1, to put it in perspective. So there you go. Okay, Dead Space 3, an 8.5 out of 10. Alright, that's it for the Hateful Truth review of Dead Space 3. I hope you enjoyed it. You now know whether or not you're going to enjoy this kind of game. You know the changes from the previous installments. I tried to give you maximum truth and minimum bullshit, cut through all the nonsense. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I hope that it was informative, and I will see you next time for another edition of the Hateful Truth.